Hey there, Viv from Art with Viv here, and today I'm going to show you how to paint a sweet little bear cub with some watercolor. So won't you please join me? I'm looking forward to it. So we are going to start off with the background first. The background, we're just going to wet it. We're going to do a little bit of a negative painting style background. So we're just wetting the background, going around the bear, going around the trees, the two trees that are in the very foreground. I'm adding a little green, some yellows, some green golds, a little blue, a little purple. I'm just really just splashing in any of the colors that I feel like I want to. I am keeping in mind that I want the upper portion to be lighter, where the sun will be shining through the forest, and below the lower part I want to have darker colors in those areas. So I'm keeping that in mind, and I'm just working wet into wet, just dropping in a mix of colors, the lighter blues, the lighter greens toward the top, darker blues, deeper greens toward the bottom. And I'm going to let this layer dry. Once I get it painted in, and then we're going to add another layer. So I've let that dry. I'm coming in with another layer. So what I'm doing is I'm wetting my paper first. Where I want the where I want to put the paint, I'm adding a little perylene green, a little bit of indigo down at the bottom. Now I don't know if you can see in the video, but I have drawn some trees in the background, and I'm going to paint around those trees. And you can start to see where the trees in the background where I've painted. I'm painting around though, that's a negative painting technique. And again, I'm keeping in mind that I want my lighter greens up toward the top and darker blues and greens at the bottom. So you can see here as I am painting around each one of the trees that I've drawn in the background. Once we get this layer done, then we are going to let it dry and paint one more layer in the background. That last layer has dried, so now we're on the third layer, and these will be much smaller areas that we're painting, where I've drawn in some more trees in the background behind those second set of trees. So right now we have foreground trees, middle ground trees, and now we're going to have true background trees in the very back. And I'm painting another layer, much darker, onto this area or onto these areas, and that really starts to make the layers show, the different trees show that I have drawn in the background. But as you can see, the areas are much smaller than I'm painting because I've almost got the trees filled up in the background. And you can see I am painting around this tree that's crossing behind that the other trees. It's the one that's far in the background, painting around another one that I've drawn in. And with each layer that you do, you are bringing forward more trees. And the only way you're doing that is painting around their shapes. You're not painting the actual trees, you're just painting around their shapes. That's what makes it negative painting. So once we get this, and I'm darkening up this one because I want it to separate, to make sure that you can see that there are three different layers of trees. Once we get that done, we're just going to wet the bear, and we're going to add a little bit of yellow ochre, or either you can use raw sienna. It's up to you, but I'm just doing the wet on wet. I'm avoiding his eyes, and I'm just wetting him down and just starting to put in the browns. Even though he's a black bear, some of that brown shines through. So we're going to go ahead and do that under layer first, adding more pigment where we want it darker. And now we're going to start on his eyes. I've gotten a little closer. I'm just using a mixture of burnt umber, a little bit of sepia, some people call it sepia, and I am just painting in those little eyes using my number 2 brush. I'm leaving some of the white of the eyes, to show through for the highlights. Now I'm wetting around his eyes. I'm adding a darker brown around his eyes. I'm leaving his little nose that brown color because black bears have brown noses, and trying to just get the shapes of his eyes and all of the little patterns around his eyes and the highlights and the shadows, just get them in there the best I can. I'm adding a little bit more of a burnt sienna over his nose for the shadows there, and we're just going to work this out in little steps. Now I'm just going to do his mouth underneath his little nose. And I'm using the tip of my brush to blend in some of those shadows. I'm working wet on dry. That nose is dry, so the shadows are more crisp. You can see the edges. There's more of a hard edge, but I'm not worried about it because I'll come in and blend that out with another layer. Or some of them I'll probably leave. Now I'm taking a little bit of that violet, that purple that we used in the background. I've watered it down and it has just a little bit of the brown in it so that it's more of a gray violet. And I'm painting in his little nosy. And I'm leaving some white highlights in there, letting it dry as we go. And now I'm going to start adding the darker browns around his eyes, and I'm just doing it in small little strokes, and I'm trying to make sure that I remember to do my strokes in the same direction that the fur is growing on his little forehead and across his head. Now once I've gotten the first layers of the colors of his little head on, I've also darkened up his nostrils quite a bit, around his chin, and just made sure that I've gotten some more fur strokes in there. We're going to start on his body. Now his body is really dark, but it does have some of that lighter brown in some spots. But we're just going to take a really dark brown. You can add some indigo blue to some burnt umber to get it really dark. I've also added a little bit of violet in the mix here and there, and some of the blues that we used in the background, just in some of the lighter areas you see here. And I'm wetting it first and then just dropping in the different colors and letting those blend together. And also putting in a little bit of fur spikes coming off his little paws, his little arm. And we're just doing a nice wet and wet, adding a little bit of that purple in there as well. And I'm just sort of softening up his face with a damp brush, just had clean water on it. Now I'm going to wet his body and put that really dark sort of brownish mixture on there, brownish black, which is really just like some sepia, a little bit of burnt umber, maybe a little bit of that indigo blue. So you just mix it probably the consistency of milk. Wet the paper and just let it spread on its own and get that little body painted in. Try to pay attention to where he's darker on his body. Pay attention to the highlights. In the lighter areas, I'm adding a little bit of purple. I'm just trying to make sure that he's staying unified with the background. So I'm trying to take some of those colors from the background and add them to that underpainting. Now, as it's wet, I'm just taking more dots of color of the blue and the purple and making it look like it has some texture. I'm adding in some shadows around his paw and some more little fur marks. Again, making sure that I'm letting them go in the direction that his fur is growing on his body so that it looks a little more realistic. I'm just adding a little more texture on his little haunch there where he's holding on to the tree with his back leg. And he's starting to come along. He's looking really good. I'm just adding a little bit more texture in that fur across his back just by adding a little bit of the brownish black mixture in, and just sort of in some areas it's still wet, so it's blending. Some areas it has a little bit of a hard edge, which is fine. Now for the trees, I just wet the trees. I use some of that purple, really watered down mixture, a little bit of that paler yellow brown mixture. Just drop that in while it was wet and let it spread. I didn't paint the whole surface of the tree in one color. I just dropped in different colors. Also left some of the white of the paper, remembering to bring in those yellows and those purples and those blues so that it'll still be unified with all the colors we used in that background, so it still looks right. And then we're just going to work on doing the little knots and some texture on the tree. And once we have that in, then we're just going to do some finishing details and put some highlights around, just using a little bit of gouache mixed with a little bit of the paler yellow color, and get in some of that texture so that it's more unified and it's not so, he looks more finished. We want him to look more finished. He's holding on to that tree for dear life. And I'm just taking my scrubber brush and I'm just dabbing out some of those areas right on that side of the tree away from him so that it looks like the sun's shining more on that side. And you can see I'm just wetting my brush, scrubbing some of the color up, and then dabbing that excess color up with a clean paper towel, or as clean as I can get it. So that leaves a little texture and also makes it more highlights. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please share it with people that will enjoy it as much as you. Consider subscribing, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. And please, if you liked it, if nothing else, just give me a thumbs up. It helps me keep being able to make these nice videos for you. Thanks and happy painting.